Welcome to the Pro Football Network Miami Dolphins podcast. I'm your host, David Bearman, Chief Content Officer of Pro Football Network, filling in for the Matt Infante, who Adam can't replace him, but I'm going to try, alongside Adam H. Beasley, Dolphins beat writer and NFL director for Pro Football Network. Adam, welcome. It's going to be a good week. I'm here to replace Infante, but really, can I do that?
Oh, this is so disorienting, man. Like Infante and I have our groove. We know each other's habits. We can pick up on each other's cues. I'm flying blind with you, man. I have no idea. You're gonna talk. I'm gonna talk. Hopefully, we talk together and not at the same time.
I have set the over-under on how many times we talk over each other at about 3.5. Very, very big juice towards the over, but, I'm the betting guy, so enough about that. We might talk betting later. We're here to talk to Miami Dolphins. You should know that the last time I was on this podcast, by invite of you and Matt, we talked betting, and then the Dolphins went out and threw up a 70 burger on the Broncos. So that is the expectation right now with me hosting this pod.
Let's discuss the difference between causation and correlation, shall we?
Very good, very good. Well, here we have the Dolphins 4-1 right now with the Carolina Panthers on deck. Let's start with the news that is all over the place this morning. It was rumored late yesterday and then got the info this morning that De'Von Achane might be out 4 to 6 weeks, depending on what you hear and what you read. What are you hearing right now as the lead Dolphins beat writer?
Yeah, no. So we kind of got the sense yesterday when we met with McDaniel that something was weird. Like our antenna kind of went up because when a player is minor injury, he tells us minor injury. When a player has a significant concern, he makes jokes. And yesterday he was joking Mike McDaniel, but it was not naturally jokey. You could kind of tell that there was something up. There were some, in the room that thought, oh, maybe he's just trying to have some gamesmanship. And my response to that was like, do you need to play mind games to beat the worst team in the National Football League? And that's who they have this week, the 0-5 Carolina Panthers. Turns out, no, they really were continuing to do their due diligence, finding out MRI, all that, what was going on with Achane's knee. Still don't know specifically. And as we tape this at 11 o'clock on Tuesday morning, we'll give you all the information we have at the time. We're not psychics. We don't know what Mike McDaniel is going to say tomorrow. Entirely possible he goes on IR. David, the Dolphins have 4 more games before their bye. The IR minimum time to miss is 4 weeks. So entirely possible that Achane will have a full 5.5, 6 weeks to recover from this injury, including the bye. And that's probably what they're looking at. And sort of with the timeline they have with, in my opinion, Teron Armstead as well. Like they want to get through the 4 weeks with Armstead, and I think maybe an additional week, and then buy him. And then he'll be back after that. So the Dolphins offense should be back to pretty much full strength, assuming they don't have any more injuries between now and then. After the bye, the question is, can they survive the bye? Well, certainly when you play teams like the Patriots, who are terrible, the Panthers, who are unspeakably bad, you don't need De'Von Achane. But when you play the likes of the Eagles and then the Chiefs in Germany, which is also before the bye, things could get a little dicey. So I think in the short term, they'll be fine. We can talk in a second about the impact on the offense itself, which I think is going to be relatively negligible. We can discuss that. But the information we have at this moment is not a major injury, but certainly not back in 2 weeks either.
So help me out here. I'm not a doctor, not a team doctor. I am, we're talking Dolphins here. No hiding the fact that grew up a fan. I fell for it yesterday because I thought it was, I didn't believe it because I watched the game just like you did and just like everybody watching this pod did. He came back in the game after I saw the play that has been talked about a lot. In fact, I saw him run off the field with a slight limp and even was about to send you a note in the channel about doing a first to market injury report on it. And then I saw him run back in the game. Dolphins up 2 scores. He played all but one play of the last 2 drives, looked fine, didn't get any injured on those last 2 drives because the play in question occurred earlier in the 4th quarter. So there was video of him after the game walking around with no problem, talking to Giant players. You didn't see anything in the locker room. There was no sign of this other than the fact that he had a slight limp when he ran off. What are we missing here? Was it the adrenaline? Did the next morning, again, I'm not a doctor. I have knee injuries of my own. What was the difference between what happened in the game to allow him to go back in with a 2-touchdown lead and what we found out yesterday afternoon?
Yeah. So a couple of things. One, adrenaline is real. Toughing it out is real, and that's what it sounds like Achan did. It's what Mike McDaniel mentioned yesterday when I asked, "Hey, didn't he go back in the game?" So yeah, sometimes you're at the mercy of how the player feels in the moment and how much the player is willing to tell. That's quite frankly why there's the independent neurologists keeping an eye on guys with concussions, because a lot of players will play through head injuries because they want to be on the field. You need to kind of protect them from themselves. And I'll also say this, David. Um, the Dolphins tried to trade a tight end in Adam Shaheen. That the trade was blown up because he had a torn ACL that no one knew about. Right. So there are times that injuries can go undetected, and you need closer examination. Perhaps Achan came into the facility on Monday and his knee had blown up. It swelled up, and it was a different facts on the ground than it was the day before. So, and that's why when people like, oh, he'll be fine, well, not Achan in particular, but when they see a player with an injury run off the field or walk off the field, oh, he'll be fine. He was able to get off the field. I've seen people run off the field with torn ACLs before, right? So really, I do think the Twitter docs need to chill a little bit and wait for the real docs to take over sometimes. Certainly, I want as much information as possible, but sometimes you really don't know what's going on with the guy until you do the imaging. So I don't think anyone's to blame here. You got to trust your player that if something's wrong, he's going to tell you. Certainly, the Dolphins know what they have in De'Von. They know how important and dynamic he is of a player. They're not going to put him at risk in a 2-score game if they had any doubt in their mind that something was up. So, there are times that I think you can fault, teams for putting players at risk. This is not one of them. I really think that whatever he's got going on got worse overnight, and they had to address it on Monday.
So let's talk about this Dolphins offense. They're first in everything. First in yards per game, pass yards per game, rush yards per game, points per game, across the board. Not only tops in the NFL, but best in NFL history through 5 weeks, as you informed Mike McDaniel after the game in the presser, that they even beat the greatest show on turf, the '99 Rams, with most scrimmage yards through 5 games. What kind of impact does it have missing a guy like Achan, where there's, Jeff Wilson might be back, Raheem Mostert has played, you have all the speed across the board. What is missing him from the offense? How does that impact? Yes, you got the Carolina Panthers on deck, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Not too worried there. You do go to Philadelphia in 2 weeks. So missing a guy who I'm not sure anybody realized what they had until a couple of weeks ago. What does that do to this offense?
Yeah, certainly it makes them a little slower, right? I mean, we'll see what Chase Claypool, easy for me to say, Chase Claypool could give them, because he is another 4.4 guy, and he also does that with a much bigger frame than the speed guys the Dolphins currently have. So yeah, I'm not overly concerned about the speed. I think they'll still have plenty. And here's the thing, David, is that he was a healthy scratch in the opener, right? He didn't play. He wasn't hurt. He just didn't play because the Dolphins didn't have him in their game plan, and they still scored 360 points and gained 520 some odd yards, right? So it's not like this offense is totally reliant on one guy. Obviously, his 12 yards per carry it would shatter NFL records, not just break. I mean, shatter. I looked it up today, and the record for yards per carry for any player held by Michael Vick, I think in 2006, and that was 8 and change, I believe. In the Super Bowl area, the most yards per carry from a running back is Mercury Morris, another Miami Dolphins running back, who I believe he averaged 6.4. So Achan is averaging almost double what the modern era record is for yards per carry from a running back. There will be regression to the mean, no matter how healthy and fast he is when he comes back. There's no way that he's going to be able to sustain that. He has been great. He's been exciting. Certainly fantasy managers love the dude, but come on, let's be realistic. He's not going to be that for the rest of the season. I will say this, certainly the Dolphins have been their most efficient running the ball when he's got the ball in his hands by far. I'm not a huge EPA per play guy, but I think it's instructive. Their EPA per play when he's on the field rushing is out of sight. It's like 0.58, which for those who understand the numbers is just absolutely nuts. But when he's actually off the field, the passing offense is spectacular and is markedly better than when he's on the field. And because passing is more valuable than running, they're actually a more efficient offense they've been to this point in the season when he has been on the field. Now, don't take this to mean that he's not an important piece of their offense. I just think the argument we should make is, and the understanding we should have is, the sky is not falling by any stretch of the imagination. And they're going to get back Jeff Wilson likely this week. We might see the debut of Chase Claypool this week. Let's not forget about Raheem Mostert, who is another dynamic back that they have, who, so long as he can stay healthy, can do a lot of the things Achane can. So the Dolphins were very wise to build a deep and talented offense because you have injuries throughout the course of the season. And my understanding is they'll be ready for this. We'll see the return of De'Von Achane, who's been phased out as Achane has had the step forward. They've got plenty of weapons. They got plenty of backs. And it's a good thing that they kept 5 on their first roster.
So we've talked about the offense, obviously losing Achane. It is obviously not great, but like you said, they're deep. They got players, Mostert had 65 yards, 6.5 yards per carry and a touchdown. Both have been active in the passing game. Mostert catching 2 balls last week, Achane 1. Let's talk about the Giants game in general. It was a 31-16 game. The score a little bit closer than it actually felt like, with the Tua pick 6, as well as the Tua interception on their own side of the field that led to a field goal. So in reality, the Dolphins defense only allowed 2 field goals in terms of longer drives than just the pick 6 that shouldn't count against them and the short field goal. What did you take out of that game overall watching the Dolphins? It wasn't the most inspiring performance, but for those, waiting for another 70 burger to be up there, that wasn't going to happen. They did score at ease in the first half. It's 31-16 final against a really bad Giants team. What were your key takeaways that you took being at that game and following it afterwards?
It's amazing how quickly we've gotten spoiled because
Yep.
500 some odd yards, 30 some points, another 300-yard day from the quarterback, I believe. And we're like, it was
We're
okay.
spoiled.
We are, and it's great because the standard has risen here, and it's been so low for so long that it is a bit jarring, but it's absolutely right. Like they did what they needed to do, and to me, David, the most encouraging thing I saw were the 7 sacks and 14 quarterback hits that they had. They knocked Daniel Jones from the game. Now it sounds like Jones is going to be okay. Might even play this week in that barn burner of a Sunday Night Football matchup, the Bills and the Giants, which the entire nation is waiting on the edge of their seat to watch. But no, the Dolphins went against an offensive line that was down 3 and then I think ultimately 4 starters, and they beat the living snot out of them. Like they did exactly what you wanted, a pass rush that has that kind of talent, even without Jalen Phillips, by the way. Zach Sealer, who we don't talk about a ton on this show, we should talk about more, was spectacular. I think he had 2 sacks, 3 tackles for loss, and 3 quarterback hits. Christian Wilkins was disruptive. Bradley Chubb didn't have, and he hasn't had the sack numbers, unfortunately, but he was very much a factor in that game. And then Andrew Van Ginkel, who is wildly underrated, and maybe not even underrated at this point for Dolphins fans, but nationally, he's their best pass rusher so far through 5 games in 2023. And my guess is once Phillips comes back, and I would be surprised if he doesn't play this week after missing the last 2 with an oblique injury. But when Phillips comes back, we'll see who the top dog is. But he's been excellent, absolutely excellent. So I think you're going to see more and more of him on the field when they're at full strength, and less of Jerome Baker and David Long. I think he has the flexibility to play both inside and outside, and he just has a nose for the football. He's a really, really solid player. And this Dolphins defense would be in a world of hurt if they haven't had him through the first 5 weeks.
So you look at the first 4 games of the season, the defense was talked about as being the weak spot, not stopping many people, not stopping anybody in the Buffalo game. The defense, even with Vic Fangio out there, was not what we expected. The numbers did show going into the Giants game that the more the Dolphins blitz, the better they do. And that proved to be the case on Sunday versus the Giants, as the blitz numbers were as high as they were all season, and they ended up with 7 sacks and pretty much shutting down the Giants, who only had 268 yards did not score an offensive touchdown. Do you think the team turned the corner on defense, or are we blinded by the fact that they're playing arguably one of the worst offenses in the history of football? I was there the previous Monday to watch them at home lose to Seattle, and then you saw the performance against the Dolphins. They've had one touchdown in the first half all season, and it was that pick six from Tua. Have they turned the corner, or is it the fact that they played the Giants and have the Panthers on deck?
Can both be true? I mean,
They can be.
look,
They can be.
we can get into the Panthers game in a second, and they just gave up 42 to the Lions. I thought the Panthers defense was supposed to be pretty decent. That was supposed to be the strength right now of that team. We can get into that in a sec. But to me, it would have been an enormous blaring red siren if they didn't have the kind of game that they had. Now, like, they put it on tape, we know they can do it. And quite frankly, David, I don't think their pass rush has been terrible in the aggregate this season. Certainly having 7 sacks in one game is going to make any stat line look fantastic. But now they've got 17 sacks in 5 games, which, that'll put you on track for 50 plus. That's a good season, right? That's a good season of pass rush. And they've had 40 quarterback hits. And so, coverage is a major, major concern of mine, and it will be a concern of mine until Jalen Ramsey comes back. But they're starting to do what they're supposed to do. And again, like the offense, they are so diversified in talent that you don't have to rely on Bradley Chubb having 20 sacks in a season for your defense to work. You can come from a bunch of different angles. And I think you're absolutely right. The more they blitz, the better they are. Now, certainly you don't want to be reckless like Josh Boyer was last year and play a bunch of zero coverages. But they had shown that they struggle to get pressure with their front four. And Vic Fangio saw the same tape and the same stats that we did, and he's been making adjustments. So, being able to have that kind of pass rush, and look, the Giants weren't going to run the football very well without Saquon. They might have even run the ball poorly with Saquon on the field, considering how bad that offensive line was. But they did what they needed to do, and they're starting to build a little bit of confidence, and they're going to start getting healthier as the weeks go on, David. They've got Nick Needham, who, again, we're recording this at 11 o'clock on Tuesday morning. He is not yet on the 53. He might be by the time you all listen to this. It sounds like he's trending in that direction. I don't expect to see 65 snaps out of him this weekend against the Panthers. But if they can start to slowly ease him back in, he's a full year now from that Achilles tear, and that is the normal timeline. Maybe you can put him on the field and take the Justin Bethels of the world off the field. That makes you, on balance, a better defense. So trending in the right direction. Hopefully now they can finally get a little bit healthier on that side of the ball and have some consistency, because the Eagles and the Chiefs down the road are going to do things that the Giants cannot.
So the good news, you mentioned the rush defense, which had been a sore spot all season long. No Saquon Barkley, but they still held the Giants to under 100 yards rushing. Nobody had more than 25 yards. Matt Breida was held in check. Bad news, you mentioned the pass coverage. Darren Waller had his wake-up game, had been largely insignificant the entire season. 8 catches for 86 yards, seemed to throw to him every single time. The spot that's bothering me, and I know you and I talked about this on air, and I'm going to tee you up here. Where's the forced turnovers? Where the Dolphins being -3 in the NFL in turnovers, yet 4-1, not forcing them, not getting interceptions, not getting fumbles. What do you see as the problem out there, and where is this compared to other teams in the NFL and their turnover differential?
Yeah, I mean, they're really, really bad when it comes to that, and they know they're bad. You go back and think about the really good Dolphins defenses we've seen in recent years, and certainly the Brian Flores years. They were get pressure and force quarterbacks to throw up bad passes and let your dynamic playmakers in the defensive backfield come up with those turnovers, right? That's what, Xavier Howard led the league and I believe set the Dolphins franchise record in picks because of that very dynamic. Now it's kind of strange, David, because they are getting pressure, but sometimes the pressure isn't particularly effective. Quarterbacks step up and still able to make the throws. Sometimes the DBs are so far away from the player that they're supposed to cover that it's irrelevant because the quarterback still is able to make the throw. I do think that Kader Kohu is not what they're using him as. Like, he should not be a starting quarterback right now in the National Football League, and they didn't want him to be. They wanted him to be their slot corner, and Ramsey and play in the boundary obviously when they went the nickel, but Ramsey is their number 2 or 1A with Xavier Howard, depending on how you look at it. But the personnel issues have definitely hurt them. But they're just not really getting opportunities either. And I'd like to go and look up the advanced stats, and I apologize for not coming prepared, but I'd love to see how many interceptable balls they've had. It's not like they've dropped a bunch of picks. Like, have you had that recollection that they've dropped like 5-6 interceptions?
No, because for the most part, the receivers have been wide open all over the field this season. So there hasn't been many balls where I thought, oh, that should have been a pick. Might have been 1 or 2. But no, this is not a team that's dropping opportunities. Quite frankly, they're just not covering people, as we saw in the Buffalo game. And we saw a little bit with Darren Waller. He was really the only one that was getting open. And with an offense as bad as the Giants, they're going to need to dink and dunk, and they were hitting their tight end. That's what they do. That's what they try to do when you can't have more than 1.5 seconds to throw the ball. But no, I have not seen many interceptable balls that they've dropped.
Yeah, so in 5 games, they're -3 in turnovers, which is 9th worst. And here are the teams behind them. You ready, David?
I'm ready.
The Vikings, the Patriots, the Raiders, the Browns, the Commanders, the Giants, the Bears, the Panthers. How many of those teams are going to the playoffs?
None are going to sniff the playoffs.
Maybe the Browns. Maybe the Browns.
Maybe the Browns.
Yeah. So really, if it wasn't for Mike McDaniel's offense being the most prolific through 5 games in National Football League history, at least from a yardage standpoint, they would be a 1-4 or 2-3 football team, because that's what those numbers tell you they should be. So I think we should appreciate how great of a job Tua Tagovailoa has done, how great of a job Mike McDaniel has done, how great of a job Chris Greer did to put together an offense that can overcome this kind of issue. But let's be frank, they played 5 games, and one of those 5 games has been against a team currently with a winning record. And that one was against the Buffalo Bills, and they got boat raced. So you cannot continue this formula against the elite teams of the National Football League and expect to win. You can beat up on the dregs, and there are some bad teams on their schedule this year. And they're going to probably go 12-5, 13-4, even with a negative turnover ratio, simply because they're that much better than the teams on their schedule. But you get into the playoffs, you're going to lose. Like, the playoff record for teams with negative turnover ratio is astronomical. Like, you can survive bad teams and do it. You cannot survive the Chiefs of the world, even the Bengals of the world, who seem to be coming on a little bit. The Bills of the world, even the Jaguars. Like, you play that kind of game against Jacksonville, you're going to lose. So, and I think they understand that. I asked Christian Wilkins on Monday about it, like, what is the missing element? And he said, we've got to make it happen. It's something we emphasize in practice and try to focus on. We have the right mindset when it comes to it. We do emphasize it. We got to continue to practice it, and eventually it'll happen. We'll see. It better.
And you mentioned the lack of getting takeaways on defense. The offense gave the ball away as well. 2 picks by Tua, 1 fumble by Achane. Mostert has lost the ball each of the last couple of weeks. As we close the door on this Giants game and move forward to previewing the Panthers game, 2 picks by Tua, not very good throws. In fact, probably the worst throws he's had all year. He's not going to be perfect every single game. He still threw for 308 yards, a couple of touchdowns, and he's still among the leaders in the MVP race. Do those 2 interceptions give you any pause for concern of what some people might say the old Tua, the pre-Mike McDaniel Tua, who every once in a while, whether he's trying to force something or throw the ball away, sometimes makes, would you say, not good decisions? He had those 2 bad picks. Chalk it up to just bad throws, or do we have a problem here?
The pick in the end zone is completely inexcusable. There were 2, 3, maybe even 4 guys in the area. He basically dropped back and decided where he was going to throw the football before his eyes could catch up with his arm, right? I mean, that's essentially what happened. Deserved that pick 6. And that was the difference between the Dolphins winning by whatever they won by 15, 16 points and 25, 26 points, right? Because that was a 10-point swing. At worst, you're getting a field goal there. So, completely inexcusable. The other one, I don't know. I'll have to go back and watch it closely. Someone said his hand might have been like hit on a helmet, or there may have been something that impeded that throw. certainly, I mean, airmail and Waddle by 20 feet or whatever it was jarring to see the result. I'm not going to crush him so much on that one. But the picks in the end zone, he has every single game, he has a knucklehead throw. And he's been able to get away with it a lot because on aggregate, that offense is so good. But again, you give a pick six up to the Chiefs, you're going to lose the game. You give a punt return for a touchdown to the Chiefs, you're going to lose a game. They score in non-offensive ways. These elite offenses, the Bills, the Chiefs, they're going to beat you because you're just not going to be able, particularly with how the defense has played through 5 weeks, you're not going to be able to get enough stops the rest of the game to win the game unless you're perfect on offense. Unless, aside from that pick six, you scored in your other 7-8 possessions, which is not out of the realm of possibility for this team, but it's also not particularly likely.
No, and what I thought was great, and it's not something we've seen in the past, and Coach McDaniel has talked about this with Tua, is instead of it letting it simmer and annoy him and affect the rest of his game, he just turns around. Like after the pick six, Dolphins drove right down the field and got a field goal, and only a field goal because time ran out. So they responded well. Same thing with the next interception. After the next interception, they went right down the field and scored as well. So they rebound fast. They have the weapons to do it. End of the day, they got out of there with another win, 4-1 on the season, one of the better starts the Dolphins have had. You do make a point that who have they beaten? The Chargers are a 500 team that probably will be on the fringe of the playoffs, if not in the playoffs. But other than that, New England, Denver, and the Giants. Not sure anybody saw this home schedule being as weak as it is, with the first 3 games being Denver, New York, and then now Carolina. What do you expect in this game? Some people would say it's a look-ahead spot because you got Philadelphia the following Sunday, the undefeated Philadelphia Eagles. But look ahead or not, this is a very, very bad Carolina Panthers team. What do you expect to see this week with Miami versus Carolina?
A lot of what you saw in Miami versus New York. I think those are the Giants and the Panthers might be the 2 worst teams in football. And throw the Broncos in there, maybe even the Patriots. There are some bad football teams out there. The Panthers might be the worst. I mean, their offense, it's not often that coaches go one and done, particularly after having the number 1 pick in the draft, particularly the coach having the pedigree of Frank Reich. But, Tepper is kind of a wild card. He's kind of a loose cannon as the owner of the Panthers. There's certainly some heat on that team, and we'll see how they respond. But they're absolutely talent deficient on offense. I mean, they have nobody who can separate. It's Thielen is a shell of his former self, and even I think he's their leading receiver. I mean, it's a really, really bad offense all the way through. Did they draft the wrong quarterback? Perhaps. We're seeing obviously what CJ Stroud is doing in Houston. They're in every single game, right? If David, if I were the owner of an NFL franchise, I probably wouldn't work for PFN because I'd be worth $17 billion. But if I were,
Your side job.
I would hire. This would be how I fill my days. So I'm out on the golf course all day. If I were an owner of an NFL franchise, the very first thing I would do would be to call the Shanahan family and say, who's the hot new coach, right? Who's the one that's from your tree that you like the most, and we're going to give them $15 million a year to come be our coach. Because you look at the Houstons of the world, obviously the turnaround they've had in Miami. The Rams, for goodness sake, is that a good team? No, but they're a solid football team, and I wouldn't be surprised to see them make the playoffs. That tree just bears fruit wherever it goes, and I don't know why the Panthers didn't go to that well. Frank Reich, there's a reason he got fired in Indianapolis. There's a reason they're 0-5 right now, and Carolina, again, it's early, but there are questions obviously in Charlotte as to who actually made the pick of Bryce Young. Was it the coaching staff? Was it the GM, Scott Fritter? Or was it the owner who said, you know what, this is who we're going to get? And if it was an owner call, he's going to regret that decision, because right now it looks like Bryce Young is at best the number 2 quarterback in that class.
Yeah, teams get very, very wide-eyed when it comes to quarterbacks in the first round of the NFL draft. We've seen numerous occasions, like almost every year now, where teams are trading up, giving up a lot of assets to get the number 1 pick. And all I can say is if you do that, you better not miss. We've seen it in Chicago multiple times with Mitchell Trubisky and Justin Fields. We've seen it in other cases, and now we're seeing it with the Panthers, where you're going to give up an all-pro wide receiver, and you're going to give up next year's number one pick and more. You got to get the right quarterback. So they may have basically committed the NFL crime of all crimes, malpractice, by giving up your number one for next year, by giving up your star receiver and choosing the wrong quarterback. So the verdict is out. Maybe it's the offense, maybe it's the coaching, we don't know. But CJ Stroud definitely seems head and shoulders ahead of Bryce Young right now. It was obviously a big debate the entire lead up to the draft which one it should be, and Anthony Richardson being in the mix there that Indianapolis got at 4. You wonder, they gave up those assets. They don't have a first round pick next year. That's like the death knell in the NFL, which Chicago has been going through since the Mitchell Trubisky trade up. Kansas City hit when they traded up. They didn't go all the way to 1, but they traded up and got their guy. Not to go into a tangent of NFL drafts.
Oh, tangent away, my friend.
I mean, you gave up DJ Moore, and now all you hear out of Carolina every single week are the NFL aggregators saying the Panthers are looking for a number one receiver. You just traded one. Now, we don't know what went on behind the scenes. We don't know if DJ Moore wanted out, whatever it was. You gave up your number one receiver to get a quarterback that's not as good as you thought, and now you're looking for a receiver. So they're in a hot mess right now. People are going to be asking, did the Panthers have a chance? It's a 14-point underdog. It's the National Football League. Everybody has a chance in every game. I gave you the stat a few days ago. It's the first time since the Dan Marino days that the Dolphins have been a double-digit favorite in back-to-back games. Is there any path that you see where this doesn't work out in the Dolphins' favor next week versus the Panthers?
Tua gets hurt.
Yeah,
I mean, that's like, seriously, barring something like that happening, they're going to win this game, and they're going to win it going away. The Panthers are terrible. I'm curious, since you're our betting guru of this podcast, what do you got this week? What do you like?
Oh, we're going to go to the betting. Yeah, I mean, the betting pod's not till Thursday, so I have time there. As far as this game's concerned, I'm not a big fan of laying double digits, and I hesitated in laying the double digits last week against the Giants. Even seeing the Giants the week before, it's just not a profitable strategy to lay double digits. That being said, depending on where the number ends up, there are ways to play it with alt lines and or teasers, which again, I'm not a fan of teasers, but the Dolphins last week at 12.5 fell into that situation where you could move it through two key numbers, but that's for a whole nother show. If forced to choose this game, I would lay the 14 before taking the 14, but it is the National Football League. Double-digit dogs cover more times than they don't. Even last week, as much as the Dolphins dominated New York, the Giants had a shot at the end. They drove to the Dolphins' 15-yard line, had a chance to score, and would have covered the spread had they done so. So it's not that hard to cover 12, 14 points in the NFL, especially in games where I'm not saying the Dolphins will take the foot off the gas, but let's say the Dolphins do get up by 17, 20 points in the fourth quarter. You don't want to get people injured like, Achane got injured in the fourth quarter last week. You got the Philadelphia Eagles on Sunday night, which we'll get to in a second. The following week, it's not, especially with the way the Dolphins defense is covering teams. The Giants went right down the field in consecutive drives last week when the game was out of hand. That's the danger of laying 14 points. The Dolphins could be up 17. The game could be completely out of reach, and Carolina could score a touchdown late, and we know the term backdoor cover. You could lose the bet. So I tend to not lay the 14. You shouldn't take any money line bet. It's way too much to lay. But if forced in a pool, I would lay the 14 with Miami because they also have that explosive offense that can score 14 without a blame. The beginning of that Giants game looked like it was going to be 70 to 20 again. The way that game started, a pick six, turnover late. All of a sudden, you only win by 15, and we say only 15. One more Giants score, and the spread is covered.
All right, so we both are in agreement that the Dolphins are going to win, and they're going to probably win pretty handily on Sunday. I have nowhere near that conviction the following week, and we just before we get going, real quick, we probably won't have you on next week. So your thoughts on what might be the game of the year for the Dolphins? I mean, probably the Bills Week 18 at home will be the game of the year because that might be for the AFC East, but it is certainly their most challenging road game, I would say, of the year, going up to the defending NFC champs. They obviously play the Chiefs in Germany. That's a neutral site game. Um, what do you think? Like initial thoughts? We're not going to hold you to this. Just off the top of your head, Dolphins Eagles.
It's going to be a tough one, no doubt. It might be the toughest game on their schedule because the way the Eagles are set up, they're a run-first team, a quarterback that can scramble, a couple of running backs that are really, really good and Swift and Gainwell, and then, of course, all-pro receiver out there, and A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith on the other side. So they have an explosive offense that the Dolphins haven't shown they can stop one. They had absolutely nothing to stop in the Buffalo game. They still allowed Denver to score some. The Chargers went up and down the field. So that Dolphin defense that we saw against the Giants is going to need to step up for them to have a chance in Philadelphia, because I still think the Dolphins can score. They can score on anybody in the league. They still scored 20 points against the Bills and probably would have been more if they were able to keep their offense going without being down 4 touchdowns. I think it's going to be a much more competitive game than you saw against Buffalo. But to be honest, Adam, I haven't been – throw the record out the window. They're 5-0, and they deserve to be 5-0. I have not been overly impressed with the Eagles this season. Granted, they've won all 5 games. That's all you can ask for. They're still one of the top 3 teams in football with the Niners and potentially the Dolphins. But it's not like Patriots game came down to the last play. Vikings game was a 6-point win. They blew out the Buccaneers. The Buccaneers are not as good as people thought they were. Had the rally versus the Commanders to win in overtime. And the Rams game was a 1-score game until late. So, again, getting the job done as good teams. Good teams win. Great teams do even better cover, but they haven't been. Not been impressed with the Eagles, but this also might be the biggest game the Eagles play all year, because if the Cowboys don't get their act together, the division's already wrapped up. The number 1 seed will come down to when they play San Francisco in December. So this is probably the most important game of the season outside that San Francisco game. So they're going to be up for it. Toe-to-toe, I think this is going to be a very good game. Probably 2 of the top 3 most talented teams in the league. Give the edge to Philadelphia being at home on Sunday night with an offense that scares me with the Dolphins' defense. That being said, if the Dolphins can match them touchdown for touchdown, it's going to be one hell of a game.
That was good. I got nothing to add. I'll agree with every point. It should be fun. We got to get going, man. We've run a little bit long, but I enjoyed talking to you as always. I think you have some housekeeping to take care of, don't you?
I do. Remember, this is the Miami Dolphins podcast, Pro Football Network. David Bearman, Adam Beasley. You can get all of our Dolphins content in one place at profootballnetwork.com/Miami-Dolphins. Don't forget the hyphen, Miami-Dolphins. If you haven't already, subscribe to the pod on your favorite podcast platform. And if you're watching on YouTube, be sure to subscribe and like. I know Matt Infante would love more people to subscribe and like. I'm just pinch hitting for him. I'm the reliever out of the bullpen. Hopefully better than your Philadelphia Phillies reliever last night. Had to throw that in there. Fall Philly Beasley was not happy last night. But also go to profootballnetwork.com, Miami-Dolphins, to get all of the stuff that Adam writes every single day, covers the team, goes to practice, goes to the games, all of the inside information. And he was the reporter who asked the question to Mike McDaniel as to whether he should be happy that the Dolphins have the most scrimmage yards in NFL history through 5 games. And your coach had fun with that one, Adam.
Yeah. No, my 15 minutes of fame, the crowning moment of my journalism career.
So that's a wrap here. Once again, Dolphins 4-1, going home this week to face the Carolina Panthers before facing Philadelphia the week after. Adam and Matt will be back next week, hopefully to talk about the 5-1 Miami Dolphins and preview that Philadelphia game. So for Adam Beasley, I'm David Bearman. Thank you for listening.